have us get started?
Yeah.
Yay, thank you.
So the recording is on. Jay, if you want to start with the introduction.
Yes, I shall. So pardon my directional site I am going to be reading because I get garbled a lot if I'm under pressure. So just pardon that, but I'm here and present with you. So thank you so much for being here. We want this to be a brave space for you to come as you are and be as you need to be. So we welcome you to have your camera off or on, up to you. Have your pronouns in your name, up to you. And the chat box is always open for any comments or concerns that you may have or questions during the discussion as it progresses. We will do our best to make sure everyone is heard and seen in the time that we have. So get your tea, your blanket, fidget toy, what I have, or whatever you need to get comfortable. I'm glad I gave her a reminder. And yeah, we'll dive in. And we already covered the recording thing. So I guess we'll start with our introductions. Andrew, if you want to spearhead that.
Yeah, so my name is Andrew. Cats behind me. Been polyamorous for about 8 years and queer for almost as long. So I'm kind of coming at this having started in polyamory and slowly kind of modified my labels and the way I identify towards ethical non-monogamy. I want to talk a little bit about that transition during this. I also help organize Queer Scouts, which is an Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti, Michigan-based group for LGBTQ people who are also kinky. It's a really good time. We have monthly, well, before the pandemic, we had monthly meetups.
Freaking, yeah.
Hopefully we'll be able to get those started again in the near future, but good food, occasional hikes, some like rope jams and other interactive lessons, and it's a good time.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. And as you may know, I am Jay. Hi, I use they, them pronouns, and I am, I've been polyamorous, for about 5 years now, maybe 6. It's a little unclear when I actually started, but it's been a journey, and I definitely, looking back, can see how polyamory has played into me developing my queer identities, and me discovering who I actually am instead of who people tell me I am. So been through a lot of hard relationships to find that out, but we're here, and now I'm in this spot of ethical non-monogamy, which I'm so grateful for. And I'm very excited to share my experience with you all, and get to questions and dig deep and just chat it out and see what happens, get the answers that you need. As far as the other parts of my life, I'm very passionate about being an agent of change for a more equitable society. So that means decolonization, off-centering white supremacy and getting rid of that completely, and making more brave spaces for people to be in community with each other and learn about themselves so that we can have a more compassionate world, because that just radiates out. I am gender fluid. I technically autigender, non-binary. I'm pansexual. Obviously, I'm polyamorous. I also am autistic with ADHD, and I'm disabled with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I also claim that I'm spiritual without religion, because I believe in spirituality without the confines of what a lot of organized religions, I don't know how to say that. They just produce that structure. So anyway, that's me in a nutshell. And as you know, I run Queer Cult, which is a blog, and I am starting Queer Cult Community, which is a small private community where people can come as they are and get the answers that they need and support that they need, or just share celebrations about who they are and the world around them. And yeah, I think that'll do it. Do we want to do a quick, since we're just the 4 of us, do y'all want to introduce yourselves as well? You're welcome to. You don't have to.
Tabby, why don't you start?
Okay. I've been poly for, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. And I started poly on hard mode with a triad.
Oh God.
I was not prepared. And that kind of blew up. So I'm starting fresh and would like to learn how to do it correctly.
All right.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm Antoinetta. I am actually ambiamorous, which is both polyamory and monogamous. I don't have a specific preference. It just depends on who I'm in a relationship with, or like I have the ability to enjoy both with little to no preference between the two. It's not a type of relationship, more specifically like a feeling that I may have towards relationship. It has been really really unique. I may have one partner, or I might have multiple. It really depends. I tried the poly triad back in 2015, and we were all young and stupid and we fuck up, and then now we're just learning what the intentional communication, how important it is. So I'm excited to learn more, because we're all forever students.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yes. Love it. Thank you both for sharing. Oh, also, I might do sparkle fingers occasionally, because I might be resonating with something. I might want to show support for something. I might want to celebrate something. So sparkle fingers. You're welcome to do that as well, but don't feel obligated. So I guess we'll just dive in here. We have a short outline. We're gonna let the topics flow depending on what the conversation calls for. But I wanted to start with structures. What does polyamory look like? We already mentioned the infamous triad.
Infamous triad. I'm in a V, and I'm much happier with that. It is
really
incredibly stable.
Hey, that's awesome. I'm glad you found what actually works for you, So we have a few to talk about, but of course, like I said, things can evolve. So there's, of course, kitchen table poly, parallel poly, and what Andrew likes to call birthday poly. So we'll get into that. But I guess, Andrew, do you want to take off?
Yeah. I'll back up a little bit. I kind of want to we talked about this in the introductory material, but also just kind of setting the stage and expectations. A lot of poly resources that are out there are kind of focused on the person who's brand new and says, like, what is polyamory? Do they know about each other? And so we're trying to move a little bit beyond those questions. And that's where things like sort of the social structure of your polycule can come in, because, if you've been dating as a polyamorous person for, 2 to more years, you're probably dealing with multiple partners at a time, and those interactions, how your metamors interact with each other. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of what we're going to be focusing on in this introductory panel is kind of going over those basics a little bit as they relate to our personal experiences. And I think since this is a small group, one of the things that Jay and I were planning already was doing this as kind of a fishbowl, and so there would be interactivity after about the first half hour. And so if either of you want to jump in and share your experiences as well, that is more than welcome. So yeah, kitchen table is probably one of the more common terms that people are aware of. Just to give a definition, that is the polyamory where you and all of the people that you're dating can sit around at a kitchen table and have a meal together like every night and enjoy each other's company all the time. That is in contrast to parallel polyamory, which is where each of your relationships is kind of on its own track, and your metamors, your partners, don't necessarily interact with each other very much, if at all. And both are pretty common structures. I personally really enjoy kitchen table poly when it happens. But one of the things that I've learned in my many years of being polyamorous is that you shouldn't try to force it. And so what I've settled on, a more realistic expectation for me, is the birthday party polyamory, which is that they don't need to be able to like sit down to a Sunday dinner every week and get along and like hang out when you're not there. But it'd be nice if they can get along once a year for a big party that you might throw, say, your birthday. And so kind of just recognizing that there's this continuum of levels of interaction, and that I think there's been a tendency kind of in the polyamorous community to put kitchen table poly as like the healthiest and the best.
Yep.
And I don't think that's true at all. And so, you know, kind of having those more in-depth conversations about things like, well, what relationship styles do we want and what boundaries can we set around them, rather than like, what are they and is one the best?
Right. And then have expectations and, like Andrew said, force something on people when that's that kind of tension is just going to break the relationship, and it might break more than one relationship because you're trying to force it on more than one person.
Yeah.
So yeah, that being said, there's a lot of, is it okay if we jump to do's and don'ts? Because I feel like that was pretty
I mean,
do
we can jump wherever. Do you have anything to add on sort of social structures within a polycule?
Yeah, I guess I'll say, as far as my experience is concerned, I also really enjoy kitchen table poly when it happens. There can be blurred lines, unfortunately, when that happens. So it's always important to have honest communication up front when feelings are had. Like when you feel the feeling, you talk about the feeling and then see what happens. So that can get uncomfortable, but it's important. And to avoid like specific toxic things, I mean, obviously we talked about the forced relationship style on people, very toxic. Don't do it. it will not be worth your time. But outside of that, I think Andrew already touched on it with the hierarchy thing. Like all of these styles are valid. And it really is up to the individuals involved to decide what's best for them, which then would bring me to the do's and don'ts, because a lot of that sometimes involves veto rules or having this codependency that can get really toxic. Like in my first polyamorous relationship, for an example, I was dating a person who had to be with someone else when I was with someone. So that kind of structure I learned very quickly does not work, because as soon as they had a cancellation, I was no longer allowed to go out with the people that I was planning to see. And that became this really ugly codependency. So that being said too, I mean, I don't know what to call that exactly outside of codependent structure, but it can happen in kitchen table, it can happen in parallel, it can happen in any poly situation. And then my comment on the veto, I don't like the veto. I think it's not okay to give people ultimatums unless it involves.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit on what veto
Sure.
is
Veto
in
meaning
this context?
In a polyamorous context, veto meaning I don't like this person, I don't want you to see this person, and if you see this person, you know, it's either me or them kind of thing. While it's important to take into account the person that's already established in your life, that relationship, we talk about boundaries, not rules. So boundaries meaning, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this person because I see how they treat you, or I'm uncomfortable with this person because, like, there is an I statement. So I feel when you, and then there's the boundary that comes after that. So maybe this person, I can tell this person isn't good for my person, and that makes me upset. And I voice my opinion. I say, I see this happening. I don't like it. I don't want to be around this person. It has to be centered around you, your boundary, because it's your boundary. Like, you get to say, I'm not going to be around this person when you're with them, or I'm going to take some space after you see this person because I need to cool down, or, you know, that kind of thing. But when it comes to you telling someone else what they can and cannot do, that can lead to abusive tendencies. So it ultimately comes up to you for you to veto for yourself, saying, okay, if you're really wanting this person and I'm uncomfortable, I've voiced several times that I'm uncomfortable and I see them treating you badly or whatever the case is, it's up to you to decide, what are my boundaries in this relationship? Do I even want this relationship to continue? Do I need to step back and not be a primary partner? Do I need to, you know, figuring out your relationship or your relation to the situation, not the other way around. Those are two of the biggest things that I learned the hard way when I was getting into polyamory. Do you want to add anything to that, Andrew?
Yeah, I think what you said was all pretty good. What I also want to acknowledge that, like, the difference between rules and boundaries can get really slippery and really gray.
Yes.
Because, right, Jay said the same thing twice, and one of them was a rule or an ultimatum, and the other was a boundary, right? One of them was, you change your behavior or I'm leaving, which is the ultimatum or the rule version of the statement. But then later they, you know, were thinking internally and setting this boundary for themselves of, I've expressed my discomfort. If they continue in this way, does this make me reassess the relationship, right? Like,
yeah.
and so in one, the rule is sort of external, it's a punishment. You leaving your partner is a punishment. And in the other framing, it's really about what you will allow into your life, right?
Yes.
And so you could, right, think about it not just in terms of a partner you didn't like a metamor, but you could also think about it in terms of lifestyle. Like, maybe you're a person who struggles with alcohol abuse, and you say, I won't date anybody who drinks, right? That's a boundary, because that is an internal rule about my internal behavior, that I won't date someone who drinks. But, right, I could also express that exact same sentiment as a rule. Let's say I'm dating someone who doesn't drink and they start drinking, right? The difference is, like, oh, you know, you're doing this thing that crosses my boundary, and then they can sort of decide what to do with that information. And then are you, like, leaving them as a punishment, as a way to control their behavior, or are you leaving to assert your boundary and keep yourself safe?
That's beautifully stated. Thank you, Andrew. I know I was getting around the topic. I do that. But that was very succinct. I appreciate that. There's another thing.
Well, we had that in the kinds of polyamory, we had that question from one of the messages, if you want to read that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost kind of want to wait for Tabby to come back.
Yeah, we can wait.
She's checking on a quiche, Antoinetta. She's cooking a quiche.
It's very important.
Got to keep the quiche alive. Yeah, I think touching on that comment or the question about the mono stuff, and then maybe going through some learned lessons that can include some of the do's and don'ts that haven't been touched on. I think ultimately, though, in any relationship style, whether it's mono or a different kind of poly, like literally any kind of relationship, even in friendships, and like this is the culture that we've been force fed, and now that we have the opportunity to take a step back and evaluate our values, we get to say, hey, actually, in any situation, I need open, honest communication. That is the ticket right there to having any kind of healthy relationship, but especially I think in polyamory, because it is so vital to survival of any of those relationships. You're juggling more than one intimate partnership. And if you're not being honest and upfront about what you need, want, etc., it's just likely to fall apart. So, but going back to a little bit more of the structured stuff, we did have a comment from someone online, and they said, I am interested in learning how polycules cultivate space for partners that desire more mono standards. Is it possible for a mono person to comfortably integrate into polyam setting? I'm not mono or polyam, but have been practicing relationship anarchy for 5 years, and my personal views on escalation are pretty set in stone. So I feel like that has like two separate, maybe not separate, but the related subjects. I would say, and I know we talked about this earlier, Andrew, so I know you're going to agree with me, but yes, mono can integrate, but it's difficult because they are disparate relationship styles, right? So they hold true, the universal truth of that needed communication is there. But if a mono person is desiring a specific amount of time, I mean, it doesn't even have to be a mono person. It could be a parallel poly style, and this person that you're dating is in need of more time than this person, or they claim they do, and then you have to decide how to manage your time, right? It's along the same lines for mono. My caution for that is it can get toxic very quickly if you're not careful. My example, one of my ex-boyfriends, at the time I was still identifying as a cis woman, and I was exploring my queer identity a little bit more in sexuality, but I knew for sure that I was polyamorous. I had already gone through a few abusive situations, and I knew for a fact, like, this is who I am. I need this relationship style. I started dating this person, and he knew. I was very vocal about it at the very beginning. And then because I was still the fawning type personality because of the situations that I grew up in and the relationships that I had been a part of, I slowly chipped away at that identity. And I became accidentally monogamous. But I mean, it wasn't super accidental. I finally came to the conclusion, all right, let's be mono for a little while. Let's set a foundation for us to thrive on. And because of his personality, that became a very toxic situation for me, and I kind of lost who I was entirely as a person. I lost a lot because of that relationship, and it all started because I didn't stick to my what's the word? My
values, identity,
yeah. So
relationship style. Yeah.
I didn't stick to what I knew to be true for myself. So I would suggest, as if you are the mono person going into a polyamorous relationship, polycules type setting, you need to hold grace for yourself, but also for other people, and understand that it's going to be a learning curve for everybody. If you are polyamorous and you're dating a monogamous person, same deal. And at any rate, hold on to your identities. Don't let them go. Don't chip yourself away to fit someone else's needs or desires, because that's just a breeding ground for toxic bullshit. I'm just gonna say it. So that's my 2 cents. It can be done, but it can also be very hard, and you don't want to lose yourself. So if you're dating someone you really like, but the relationship style is just not working for you, you might want to reevaluate and just take a step back and then maybe pursue something else. So I don't know if you have more to add, Andrew.
So one of the things I picked up on when I was reading that note was that they were talking about someone with more mono standards. And one thing that I really want to affirm is true is you can not be dating anybody and still be polyamorous, and you can be dating one person and still be polyamorous, and that the actual surroundings of your life don't change what you are. I know there was a period in my life where I was like, well, I'm effectively monogamous, but and it's like, no, I was just polyamorous. And so yeah, it's I think important to think about what monogamous standards means, because I did wind up in a mono-poly relationship where I was very clearly polyamorous and interested in that, and the other person was very clearly monogamous and interested in that. And at the end of the day, like, we were able to part on good terms, but it was really hard because what we were parting on was like the commitments to exclusivity that they needed weren't being met. And so, right, if you're talking about monogamy, polyamory, as in someone who wants to be in a monogamous relationship and they're trying to make it work with somebody else who is living a polyamorous life, I think that that is just not going to work out. I don't think it's a
Not
recipe for
compatible.
success. But there's also, right, I am in a relationship right now where, right, it's a V relationship. So I'm dating someone who's polyamorous. I'm polyamorous. The other person, I don't think really has strong feelings either way. They wouldn't be opposed to dating other people, but they're not interested in it, so they're not pursuing it. And so that person on the other end of the V has been dating one person for 12 years while their partner has dated other people on and off, and that's worked really well for them. And so I think, right, in that setting, I don't want to put a label on my metamor on that person on the other side of the V, but the way it feels to me is that they are polyamorous in the sense that, like, their relationship style is compatible with having an open relationship, even if they're not interested in pursuing other relationships outwardly at this time. And so, like, there's kind of that little bit of nuance there of like what actual, and this is a thing that I think polyamory really makes us work on, and being queer really makes me work on, is like, you get rid of the script. and so it's no longer like, oh, I want a monogamous relationship escalator. All these things are predefined if you're deep in like heteromonogamy culture, which is you meet someone, you date, if you like each other, you get engaged, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and then you know, and it just keeps going. But once you step outside of that, you've kind of got to make up your own rules. And so even for this mono standard person, what does that actually mean? Like, what needs do they feel are monogamous, and what do they actually look like? And I think that's another, in the do's and don'ts and the lessons learned, like, take time thinking about what you actually want. Don't lean on the labels too much.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, good point. I love that, because as liberating and as useful, right? Labels are tools. They're tools for us to use. They allow us to understand ourselves, understand other people, and connect us to people with similar experiences. But it's like a double-edged sword, or two sides of the same coin kind of thing, where they can also be limiting, because we have this box of what we think polyamory, monogamy, sexuality, whatever it be, gender, you know, we have this box of what we think it is, because we're sharing and we're using it to understand ourselves. But then we don't think to look outside the box. And when things stop working for us, we're like, what gives? I'm in the box. Like, why isn't it working? That's because we need to make up our own rules. We need to be our own pioneers and advocates for things. And I love the idea, or not idea, but the real need to have those open conversations. That's what I want. Open conversations towards the beginning of relationships, to really establish, well, what are my needs? What am I looking to get met in this relationship? I mean, yes, feel things out as you feel them out, but when these things come up, it's important. You have to talk about it, or someone's going to get hurt down the line. So I really appreciate that, though, about the labels. And I also, that's another thing speaking of labels, I mentioned primary partner earlier. And now this person's talking about relationship anarchy, right? So
Yeah.
when I say primary partner, I don't really like hierarchies per se, but I feel like my polyamory does kind of fit into one in a small way. Because I have a primary partner where I live with this person. That can also be used as a nesting partner. Some use them interchangeably. I don't. I think nesting partner can be someone who you want to spend, I mean, foreseeably spend your life with, but might not have the same intimacy as a primary partner. And that's just a distinction that I make. Not everybody does that. But with me, my primary partner and I mean, we are lifelong committed. We intend to have a ceremony at some point. I don't know when, but so when I say that, it means this person, I value their opinion deeply, and I make big life decisions, or even small life decisions, with their input. And I want to work together to build a life together. And that includes consulting on relationships, and not including a veto thing. And that's not what we do, but we do share our boundaries. We do have all the things that we've talked about so far. And I sum it up with primary, essentially. So I'm not putting them first all the time, but and I mean, in a way I am, because they're my lifelong partner. This is the person that is a constant in my life. And as I'm like developing new relationships, I come back to them. So
Yeah, if I can maybe jump
please.
in a bit. I think one distinction that I like to make. So before we get into that, the terms that we're looking at are hierarchical poly, where there are like tiers and levels of, you've got your number one partner, and then you've got your like B string partners who,
God.
yeah, no.
Sorry.
And then we've got non-hierarchical poly, which often kind of tries to describe itself as like flattening everything out.
Yeah.
And one step further then is relationship anarchy, which not only flattens out your romantic relationships, but also tries to flatten out all of the relationships that you have. And say things, for instance, like I have, and this is, true of me, I have a platonic friendship with someone that is as important as what some might call my primary polyamorous romantic relationship. And so, like, all of these things kind of exist in their different modes of understanding how to structure the relationships. And I said someone who might be considered my primary. I usually think of things with hierarchy as a description and not a prescription. So a lot of, right,
like
oftentimes to protect a primary relationship, hierarchical polyamory shows up. And so it's like, there's a couple that's opening up their relationship, but they want to stay number one for each other. And that's the hierarchical poly that makes a lot of people who've been polyamorous for a while really uncomfortable, because it's dehumanizing for the other people. At the same time, I think that language is a good descriptor, because in our romantic relationships and in our friendships, there's different levels of intensity, right?
Yeah.
And so there is someone who I'm going to see every week, and another partner that I'm going to see once a month, and some long distance partners. And it's not that I value any of them inherently more or less, but because of the amount of time we spend together, the decisions that we make become more serious. And so with my primary partner and I, we are in the process of buying a house together. That involves a lot more financial discussions and planning, and right, I might have to have conversations with my partner about what sorts of trips I can afford after the pandemic when we're splitting a mortgage, that I won't ever have to have with someone who lives in a different state as me, because I'm not you know, sharing finances, I'm not sharing housing. And so again, like, I think a lot of what I'm interested in doing in this series is addressing that nuance of like, well, there's kitchen table poly and parallel polyamory, and then there's a continuum between them. And then there's also hierarchical polyamory and relationship anarchy. And there's a continuum between those two.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's
That's a
kind of
great
where
way
you
of
were
putting
going
it.
too. Is like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of hierarchical language that immediately sets off red flags for people.
Yes.
But as with any label, they can be a good starting point as long as they're not the end of the discussion.
I really like that. That's a good way of putting it. I think what I get tripped up on really is those red flags, because even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, I'm not trying to say that this person is more valuable than this person. Like, I don't want to say that, but also, like, because of the way that I've structured my life, this person does come first often. And
we do that with our friends too, right? Some friends we talk to on the phone every week, and other friends we like send each other a silly GIF once a month, and both friendships are important, and I don't want to give either of them up.
Exactly. And they're all valid, they're all beautiful, they're all important. And it's that comes down to that nuance and levels, you know, of intensity is what we're getting at, not levels of importance. So I like, that's something that I've struggled with in the past. That's another learned lesson that I learned the hard way. But now I'm really grateful to be where I am, because even with this discussion, like, I'm still learning about myself, you know. It's beautiful. I love it.
So I feel like now we're kind of about 2/3 of the way through. I would be happy to open this up for more discussion and kind of give either Tabby or Antoinetta a little bit more space on the floor. I also think now would be a good time to just all of us share lessons that we've learned, if we feel so moved. Like, what has being polyamorous for 2 or more years helped you figure out? What would you pass on to your younger self just starting out?
Yes, let's do that. Oh my God, if y'all are willing, because I love that, Andrew.
Sure. Did we lose Antoinetta?
I think she's still here. She's just off camera.
Yeah.
Okay. I got 1.5 minutes until I gotta pull a quiche out of the oven.
Oh, okay.
So, I don't want to start on something then have to be like drop the headset and walk away.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I am curious, what is relationship anarchy like? What is this?
So I'm gonna try and be nice, but I have feelings.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's a controversial topic in the community.
Hence the question.
I'm gonna start with a history lesson.
Yeah, all right.
Relationship anarchy started primarily from the anarchist community and not the ethical non-monogamy community. And it looked like direct action in a lot of respects. So the first essay where relationship anarchy shows up, the author talks about, I believe she identifies as a woman. She talks about stealing kisses from people's girlfriends, right? And that is direct action relationship anarchy, right? Like, as an anarchist doing direct action, you're trying to undermine political structure, you're trying to disrupt political systems. And in relationship anarchy, you're trying to disrupt what you see as an inherently coercive and ownership-based, contract-based, hierarchy-based relationship style.
Yep.
So I'm going to pause a bit because I know that Tabby was the one who asked this question.
No, that's fair.
I have lots of feelings about it.
Yeah, and so just like the one penis policy, like these two things, so many feelings.
Okay. And so, like, as someone who practices non-monogamy, and if you have to put that modifier on it, ethical non-monogamy. Side note, small beef, nobody asks, oh, you're monogamous, are you ethically non-monogamous? So like,
It's a
I'm
double standard,
non-monogamous.
damn it.
Yeah, but then you get relationship anarchists who are trying to undermine heteropatriarchy through direct action, and that looks like enticing people to cheat.
Yeah.
And like, in theory, I can understand the rationale behind it, which is like, if Jay is monogamous and I am attractive and available and I steal a kiss from them, they consented to that. They voluntarily engaged in that. And the only thing that's broken from the anarchist perspective is an unethical, coercive restriction on Jay's behavior, and that Jay should be a free agent. Which brings us into modern polyamorous discourse on relationship anarchy. Relationship anarchists have a reputation for being fuckboys who don't want to be accountable for their partner's feelings. Because they want to be free agents, and if that hurts someone else's feelings, like, well, you weren't part of that interaction, so it's your problem to get over. And I really don't like that. I think I'll speak for Jay on this. We've talked about it a little bit. They're not a fan of that either. But I do want I do want to mention something that I think is really important and beautiful that comes out of relationship anarchy, which is this idea of decentering romance. This like amatonormativity is the word. I do have a friend who is like just a friend, platonic life partner. I will talk to this person on the phone every day if we can arrange it, and if not, like at least 2 or 3 times a week. And I will go, way out of my way to make sure they're okay and to take care of them and to do things with them. And there's no reason that my romantic relationships and my friend relationships have to be on different levels. And so relationship anarchy allows you to flatten that out and say, well, my relationships to my friends are just as important to my well-being and just as deep as some of my romantic relationships. And so I don't want to like make my primary relationship style romance and have all of my other relationships be secondary to that. And I think that's a really nice thing, is to be able to acknowledge each relationship for the intensity and importance to your life that it has, regardless of what it looks like and how society values what you're doing. Because sometimes you don't have to have sex to be life mates.
Hallelujah. Amen. Yes, like that is right on point. I also want to add that relationship anarchy, in my mind, kind of birthed solo poly. I don't actually know the relationship or the history there. So I'm ignorant, and I will fully admit that I'm ignorant, but I will say in my experience, a lot of the anarchists that I've come across were really just solo polyamorous or polyamorous. They are people who value relationships and date people and have those relationships, but it's like the relationship they have with themselves comes first. Always. They are their own life partner. And that's a beautiful way to live, I think. I think that if that works for you and that's what you desire, and what you need, do it, as long as you openly communicate, like, hey, this is the deal. I don't answer to anybody but me. And yes, we can have, opinionated discussions and work together and build lives together kind of thing. But like, I date me first. And that's another valid form of polyamory. And I think that goes hand in hand with relationship anarchy. So I don't know, maybe this is a good time to talk about anti-colonial, anti-racist stuff.
Yeah.
As far as poly stuff is concerned. Polyam stuff. I'm working on it. I'm so used to just saying poly.
Let's use that as the starting point.
Right.
So why are you saying polyam instead of poly?
So that's one thing that we want to keep consistent in the series, is to stick to polyam specifically, or polyamorous, or non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy, because poly specifically is a what's the word? Oh my God.
It's a term
label
and a hashtag.
and a
Like
hashtag.
the thing that causes the most tension is that it's a hashtag used by Pacific Islander Polynesian communities.
Polynesian people. Yep.
And so when we as polyamorous people use hashtag poly, it overshadows this marginalized group using hashtag poly to find themselves.
Yes. And especially as white people, or even white passing people, that is dicey. Like that is a bit of a certain kind of cultural appropriation. And that's not what I want in my polyam life. I want to be inclusive and raise marginalized groups to have their own voices. So if we can avoid that, I'm more than willing to jump on that bandwagon and be like, all right, get rid of poly out of my vocab. I'm sticking to polyam or polyamorous. It's more effortful, of course, because it's another syllable, but worth it because we're not harming a marginalized group.
I also want to offer a little bit of grace here, that I think once context has been established, and if you're not using it on the entire wide open internet, like hashtag poly, that it becomes more acceptable, right? Just like an optometrist, yes, generally avoid using the word poly and instead polyamory or polyam, which just includes the second syllable. Yeah. Sorry, we had a comment in the chat asking for clarification. But at the same time, like in this context, if someone uses poly, I'm not going to jump down anyone's throat for that, because it's clear in this space that we're talking about the relationship style. But in general, and especially for our public facing discussion and documents, we I think Jay is more tied to polyamory, polyam. I've moved pretty thoroughly into non-monogamy as how I identify. I think another thing with the sort of anti-colonial aspect is, again, we have a very white polyamorous community. It's white, educated, affluent people for the most part, who are publicly, visibly polyamorous. And one blogger and podcaster, Kim Tallbear, who wrote on The Critical Polyamorist, is an Indigenous American, and she talks about how there were a number of relationship styles in Indigenous cultures in the Americas that did not look like monogamy, and that is something that was imposed by
colonialism.
white colonizers. And so Kim doesn't even like identifying as polyamorous, because she's like, I'm not adopting this newfangled European style of relating. I had my own cultural ways of relating, and I am trying to get back to those. And so recognizing that relationships are another domain where colonialism and racism show up, and that I'm going to try to acknowledge that where I can, to educate myself where I can, and to spread that through this series.
Actually, do you have a link to
a link? Yes.
That would be really great.
I'll put that in the chat. We can also drop it in some notes. So criticalpolyamorist.com. I know this is an old link. She has moved. to unsettle, where I haven't actually started reading yet. But I put that in there too, kimtallbear.substack.com.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely a person worth reading and listening to.
Absolutely. Cool. So we are at 8 o'clock. I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We scheduled this to be 90 minutes just in case there was, really like a topic that just took off and people needed to explore more, or if we had more questions. We didn't touch on everything that we had listed in our outline, but I mean, y'all have experience with polyamory already, so I guess I want to leave it up to you if you have any extra questions that you'd like to explore in this space with us.
Or comments, like
Or
this
comments,
is discussion time. Yeah.
Going. This has been great.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you.
I know what I want to talk about next, if
Yeah.
Antoinetta is also good to continue, which is queerness and polyamory.
Yes, I would love to talk about that.
So for me, in a nutshell, my polyamory is queer. Not everybody's polyamory counts as queer. And this is also a thing, if people haven't encountered it, that is a big discourse with a capital D in the polyamorous community.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot about polyamory that feels queer. You have to come out. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quote. Okay, so rest in power, bell hooks. We unfortunately lost her not just a couple days ago, but there was a quote that's been circling around. So this is her speaking. Queer, not as being about who you're having sex with, that can be a dimension of it, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and to thrive and to live. And with that definition, and coupling that with my own queer identities and how polyamory has led me to self-discovery, I see my polyamory as queer as well. So I don't know. It's like Andrew was saying, big capital D with this discussion. Very contentious topic in the community, because people are like, we can't just keep adding letters to the LGBTQ, especially when cis het people claim polyamory. Like, we can't just do that. But I feel like there's an exception for actual queer people who are polyamorous, and how integrated that identity is to us,
I think that bleeds into our lives in general. So here we go. We've derailed the polyamory conference. Now it's queer talk.
Hey.
Right. There's not a lot of how I show up in the world that feels easy to separate from my sexuality and my gender.
Yep.
Right. Like the fact that I don't date women, that I am not a man. I do date women, but not exclusively. So like, that means that every time I go out in the world with some of my partners, like, we are not straight. We are queer. Our relationship looks queer. And sometimes the relationships that don't look queer are still queer.
Yep.
And so it's hard to separate out from anything, especially relationships, I think.
I mean, that just ties right back into colonialism, because our world, literally, at least here in the United States, and I mean, many other places in the world, we were by design programmed to have this mindset of monogamous, cis het relationship. And literally our entire world is structured around that mentality. I mean, we have gendered everything. Literally everything is gendered. And it doesn't need to be. We have our housewives who take care of the man with the bacon, bringing home the bacon. Like, these things are still like, they're still a part of our culture. And that's why we have so much pushback when we are visibly queer, whether it's in our relationship styles, in our sexuality, in our gender, or all of it together, especially. where we meet conflict because people are challenged. We're challenged by being who we are. We're challenging the status quo. We're challenging what people know to be true for themselves. I mean, this is something that I go through with my mom all the time. I'm challenging her understanding of what actually is true because she's taught a certain thing her entire life through her religion. And that creates conflict in our relationship. So when you put it on a wide scale, colonialism just gutted all that was good and kind of put it into these pre-packaged mold things, and then was like, here, eat this for the rest of your life. And now we're finally waking up and being like, maybe not. I'm gonna go look at some buffet
And
over here.
we're gonna get into a lot of this in more depth later in the series, because some of the things Jay touched on were like our rights, right? Visitation rights get hairy for a polyamorous situation, because if one person has one spouse, that's the person who can visit in the hospital automatically, and everybody else doesn't have those rights extended.
For kids,
I am currently navigating buying a house with 3 people on the mortgage and or title, and like buying a house is not set up for people who aren't married in a couple.
Yeah.
It's a lot more challenging to do that in more than 1 or 2 people. And so those are both topics that we're planning on: polyamory and politics, and polyamory and co-housing and cohabitation are 2 of the talks that we'll be going into more detail on those things later.
Yep. So but yeah, bringing back to queer stuff, like, I think there is room for people to claim their polyamory as queer, and that's completely valid. Obviously, if a cishet person that you know is like, yeah, I'm a part of the LGBTQ community because I'm polyamorous, no. Like, correct them immediately. But otherwise, like, I think that's a valid way to go about it. And I really enjoyed Bell Hook's perspective on the definition of queer. Because we literally are at odds with our environment in our relationship style still, because our culture is slowly shifting, and it's only shifting because we're doing stuff like this. We're being outwardly queer, outwardly poly. We're having these discussions. We're working towards a more inclusive culture. It's just taking a lot of freaking time. So anyway, yeah.
How are y'all feeling? Do you have any? Let's open up some time and some space. If either of you want to jump in and add anything.
I can answer that question now.
Comments? Which one?
I can answer that question you had earlier now.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember the question though.
Oh shoot. Don't ask my ADHD brain. I don't remember. I'm sorry. What topic were we on? We were on, you asked the relationship anarchy question.
Yeah, because I didn't want to answer the other question.
Right. I think it might have just been general, like if you had anything to comment on or add. I don't remember a specific. A lesson that you would have learned, or you did learn, and you would tell your former self.
That's right.
Oh, okay. A lot. I learned a lot. Do not start poly on hard mode. Don't do it. Especially if you are not in a space where you can have your own space.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yes.
This is a piece of advice. Oh, finish what you're saying.
I would have told myself, poly is great, and it has lots of great benefits. And yes, kiddo, you are poly, and you're pansexual, so look those up. And polyam, you're a polyam. But it's start off slow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really good.
I think those are all great. Start off slow is awesome advice. I actually, like, I felt like I was starting off too slow. I found dating as a single man in the poly community very challenging. But now, like, looking back, I'm like, you were going at exactly the right speed, because you didn't just, like, you know, plow over anybody's feelings by going too far too fast. Yeah, and a piece of advice that my first girlfriend ever, her dad gave us, was like, I don't care if you sleep together, if you like stay in the same room every night, but you have to be paying rent on separate apartments. Because if things go south, you need to be able to separate
You have
easily.
to
And like
have
that
that
is some of the best advice, monogamy, polyamory, anything. Like, don't commit until you're ready to commit. Leave
Yeah.
yourself an easy egress.
God,
Yeah, that is brilliant advice.
very
Yeah,
much
no.
so.
For those of us who may be planning to have children, just keep that one stored away.
Yeah.
For when they go to college, you can sleep with whoever you want, but you've got to have your own bed somewhere in case things don't work out.
Oh, yeah. that's
Speaking
brilliant.
of kids, I have to go call mine. Bye.
Oh,
Okay. See ya.
okay. Bye. Thanks for being here. And Janetta, did you want to add some advice for your former self or anything? Oh, can we mute her?
Yep, I got it.
Thanks. Okay, we're good.
My computer, my internet's being wonky, so if I freeze, that's why. So advice that I would have liked to share with my former self, okay? Do not be codependent on your primary. And do not allow yourself to receive ultimatums from others. Yeah, feeling like you have to make a decision. Yeah. And and so when you're given an ultimatum and you're codependent, obviously you're gonna choose whatever involves the person.
Yep.
And also the other way around, like, don't give ultimatums either, just because they give it as well. It's not like two things are wrong or whatnot.
Yeah.
Let's see. And don't bottle up your feelings, like, especially when
Don't I know it?
you know, especially when you're someone who's empathic, right? So not bottling up your feelings and like sharing and communicating. And it's almost as if when you're doing that in the beginning of your relationship, it gets easier to share whatever's on your mind, because is this person a safe space to share to?
Yeah.
No, do not act out of poly, out of pride and ego. I see that happen to a lot of people who say they're poly. And there's people that are authentically poly, but sometimes I'm like, I observe, and it's like the more the better, or like or they're afraid to be alone, so they just want this wide range of people in their life. Yeah, so I found that really interesting from different individuals from all over. You got do not have pride and ego, or are you like actually really authentically poly? So that's something that I've like been standing on the sidelines, just kind of like observing them, because it's not authentic, and authentic relationships are important to me. So yeah, I guess that's what I would advise for myself, my former self. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. Shoot, you said something, brain, go back, because it was triggering. It was before you switched to the now. You were talking about codependency, and then there was something that followed.
Getting Giving an ultimatum while you're codependent? No. Okay.
But it was getting closer.
Okay. Not being authentically poly.
So one thing that I
see.
latched onto was kind of not adding too many partners and not using having an abundance of partners as an avoidance mechanism.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes,
I really appreciated that.
absolutely. Especially because that can hide so much in all areas of your life. Like if you're truly like in a not good place, like maybe you need a mental health professional instead of 5 partners, you know, like there's some things that can be done there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then shoot, man, it'll come back to me when I rewatch this. I'm just really upset because it was like so like
I'm trying to remember what I said, and maybe I can say the thing that triggered that.
right,
So
like,
what codependency, ultimatums, authentic polyamory,
don't give ultimatums. It was like right after you said don't give ultimatums either.
I know
It was-
what
it
you're
was
talking about.
literally in between those two things and the authenticity. Oh God, brain. That's fine. This happens all the time.
Yes, all the time.
Oh my God.
Yeah, shit.
Yeah, either way.
It looks like you really had a good point too.
Who had
It looked like you had a really good point too.
I-
Like that thing that.
yeah, no, it was. So I might just rewatch the ending of this later and type it into
Okay.
something to share. But
Throw it in the recap notes.
yeah, in the recap. There we go. But yeah, all of that was so
Does
wonderful.
Andrew remember?
Nope.
No,
I tried. I threw out the one thing that I really resonated with, and
yeah.
like, that was an important one though. So like,
It was.
you know, talking about not overcommitting, using it as an avoidance mechanism. One of the pieces of advice that I didn't really need for myself, but I kind of learned by watching other people around me who did have 7 partners was like, know your limits. Like, know how many hours you can actually spend doing things with people and not on yourself. And like,
Yeah.
actually, like, this is actually a thing that was good advice for me. Jay and I go way back. We used to be on the Swing Ann Arbor board
Yeah.
at the University of Michigan together.
Oh.
I wind up planning and running things for a lot of different groups. And so even outside of like relationships, just like learn to schedule time for yourself.
For
That is, like,
yourself.
you
Oh my God.
downtime, not being productive, not working on your clubs, not working on your promo material, not working on your band material, just like you, like
Yeah.
fun time, unstructured time. Leave unstructured time for you, even though you're dating however many people.
Exactly. Yeah, that's so important. Oh my God, that's so important. I can't even tell you.
Isn't that solo polying though? Like if somebody
Not
like so they have
necessarily.
a relationship with themselves and they're focused, but they can have many multiple partners as they can because they can focus on themselves.
Well, everybody should have a relationship with themselves.
Yeah.
And social polyamory specifically refers to people for whom their relationship with themselves or something in their lives is primary. So yeah, so it could be work, it could be a music career, it could be a hobby. Maybe someone is really into live action role play or, you know, making a podcast. If that's the thing that is going to dominate your energy and your time and your life choices, then that functions as your primary relationship. It functions as the thing around which you make all of your life decisions.
Right.
And you can still have a relationship with yourself, and you still should have a relationship with yourself, even if you're monogamous or polyamorous, right? Like, it is very healthy to be able to do things on your own. For, you know, what I fail at, what I try to do is give myself an evening a week that is just me, that I don't have anybody coming over. I don't have plans to like talk to anybody on the phone. I can decide to take a bath or read or clean my room. It's just
you
open time. It's an open slot.
Yeah.
It's a
Yep.
planning period. It's a free space that I don't have to be on for. And
Exactly.
I think spending time with yourself and having a relationship with yourself is actually a really important thing to cultivate to be successful in any relationship, but especially in polyamorous relationships.
I think I just came up with a new term for myself.
But
Yeah.
Solo Ambiamorous.
ooh,
Ambiamorous.
Just
So,
all right.
yeah.
all right. I can see it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Because
Because it sounds
Another piece of advice that I would pass on to my former self is twofold. It's about jealousy. We always talk about jealousy. Thing one, jealousy is not actually a bad thing.
No.
Don't try to erase it from your life. Don't try to never feel it again. It's a normal emotion that arises. Deal with it head on. And thing two is growing my emotional vocabulary was huge.
Yeah.
Being able to stop feeling jealous and say, actually, what I'm feeling right now is envious because this other person is getting to do this thing that I can't do, or insecure because it's not just that I'm like trying to keep this thing to myself jealousy wise, it's that I'm afraid of losing the thing entirely.
Yeah.
And so, you know, learning resentment, frustration, envy, you know, detachment, isolation, and being able to like dig down a little bit deeper and say it's not just like jealousy is this big blanket term, but we have a wonderful language full of words for how we feel, and we can learn them, and that makes the communication better, and it also makes our self-knowledge better.
Yep.
When you know that the reason you're feeling jealousy, big umbrella term, is because you're feeling envious, sometimes you can look at that and say, well, what this other person has that I don't have doesn't actually hurt me, right? Like I can still feel envy and I can still want that thing very badly, but it's not something I necessarily need to change in my environment. Like that's not what's going to make it better.
And what is going to make it better though is again coming back to open communication and hitting that head on with the partner involved and be like, listen, I'm feeling this way. I know it doesn't need to change your behavior, but I want to talk it out so I can feel maybe more secure, or I can tone down the jealousy that's coming up because I know it's not like I know if I acted on it, it wouldn't be healthy. Recognizing that emotional intelligence and really working on growing that, and then coupling it with open communication is always going to have, ooh, yeah, radical honesty, love it, is always going to have a positive effect. I mean, okay, I might not say always a positive effect, but it will be effective. And we don't always have to say one thing is negative or positive. We can just witness our experience for what it is, and that's just it's happening. So what we do with our actions, right, is what counts, not what the feelings are. I mean, yeah, the feelings count, but it's what we do with those feelings, it's how we act on them that causes those like negative and positives. And if we can just observe them with our people, we can make them better.
I want to ping these two books real quick.
Yeah.
Radical Honesty by Brad Blanton and Getting Real by Susan Campbell. Because one thing that I think is true from both of them that I'm finding really valuable and lines up with the open communication is simply saying what you're feeling can often take a lot of the intensity and heat out of the emotion. Like saying, I feel really jealous, or I'm really worried that you're already dating 2 people and you're thinking about or dating 5 people and thinking about adding 2 more, that you're not going to have enough time for me.
Yep.
And like just saying it out loud, even if nothing changes, putting it out there can really take the sting out of it and make it a lot more manageable for me internally. And that has been a really powerful tool for me that I've been growing into recently.
I find that really interesting that you combine envious and jealousy, because I
No.
read
Oh,
a
no.
book where they actually separate, saying that jealousy involves more than one person, and envious just involves one person. Am I freezing up?
You're okay
You were,
now.
but we got the message. I think that's true.
Okay. Oh,
I think though that I would define them a little bit differently, and I think they're very similar because they wind up so close together. So to me, jealousy is, I have a thing and I want it all to myself. Jealousy is smog, is the dragon sitting on his treasure and not wanting to share it with others. And envy is, I see what that other person has and I want to have it.
Yeah.
Or even I see what that person has and I don't want them to have it. Right? We have looked at people who are successful, and it's not that we wish for success. Envy can also just be wishing the other person would not have the success that they have. And
there's a
so, like, I
different
feel
term
like
for that, though.
Is there?
I
Yeah,
think that's envy.
there's a different term for that. What you just said, there's a different term. I cannot remember what that term is. Oh, I wish I could remember, because like identifying these different like terms really helped what I was feeling throughout these entire relationships, right? I used to be a very jealous person, but I wasn't jealous. We're just this thing that I'm feeling. When you want something that someone has and you don't want them to have it, that's like that term that I can't buy but I'll find it. But the envious I learned was that you're envious the person is spending time with it. That's it. Not, oh, I don't want them to have it. That just adds a whole new ballpark when you say, not only do I want them not to spend time together, no, not only do I wish that I was also spending time with them, I don't want them to have it. That's
Another
another
person.
whole main range. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think I've ever personally gone through the intricacies of the differences outside of like growing up and learning about sins in Bible school. Full disclosure. But I will say jealousy creeps up. It does, even now, years later, years into this, with new people, old people, it's there. And the best way that I deal with it is what Andrew was mentioning, is just talking it out, because it does take the sting off. And often even naming it allows me to take away its power over me. Not just like lessen the sting, but like I get to name it and then I decide, I don't like that. I'm deciding to put my attention elsewhere, or I'm deciding to distract myself, like I get to choose my actions to help myself regulate, so I'm not putting that burden on the person I'm confusing jealousy over, like it's not their responsibility to regulate my emotions. That's mine. And that doesn't mean they can't support me in that. That doesn't mean they can't help me talk it out or work out a compromise, or maybe not compromise, but be explicit in their intentions with this other person so I can calm the fuck down. Like that is literally all I need most of the time. It's just communication. And then if the jealousy persists, sometimes it's not even jealousy at that point. Sometimes it's frustration because my needs aren't getting met, or it's whatever name of the emotion is, it can be something other than jealousy if it persists longer than the initial stage of talking it out the first time. So it's really more about knowing yourself and having that internal dialogue, and having that language for yourself, so that when it does creep up, you know, you don't act rashly on it. You can bring it up and name it and spit it out, and then see what to do with it.
So I do want to be mindful of
Oh, yeah.
everybody's time. It's 8:30. I will, you know, mention our second
Yes.
panel in the series, which is When Do We Break Up? That's going to be on Thursday, January 20th at 7 p.m. So add that to your calendars if you want to talk more. Yep, and Jay has got a list of links for donations and coaching and peer support sessions. I'll let them talk about that.
Real
But
quick.
also, before
Yeah.
Jay pings everything, thank you both for showing up. I had a really good time.
Yes, thank you.
And I hope to see you at future ones.
Good talks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for wanting to make this project happen with me. I am so excited to continue the series, and I do hope to see the both of you. Thank you so much again for being here. The information that I just posted about, this is completely free series, but we do encourage donation if you have the ability to, or desire. You don't have to have the desire, even if you have the ability. But just that information is there just in case. We also encourage time compensation. So if you can't or you don't want to donate, you can always just post about the series and tag Queer Call or whatever, and maybe talk about why you like the series or why you're looking forward to it. That's great, because then we get a bigger reach. And then the other links are just links to my life coaching business, and peer supports, as well as DEI work. I am diversity, equity, inclusion person. So if you have questions about diversifying your life, and working on inclusion, I can do that with you. If you have identity issues, you know, identity topics that you want to dig deep into, I also offer peer support sessions, which is not coaching. It is just coaching flavored. It's like coaching light. So that's something, and it's less expensive, less time consuming. And then of course, coaching, I do coaching contracts as well for personal development, professional development, what have you. So that's all that. Thank you again. Yes, January 20th, we will look forward to hopefully seeing you then, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your night.
You too.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Bye. Thank you. Good night. Andrew, do you want to stay on for a second?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, there we go. Bye.